there's just some books that you read where every second page you're either having to dog ear, like as in bookmark it, or if you're reading it on a Kindle, you are just highlighting every paragraph, it seems. And I've just finished reading Ivan Cleary's book, Not Everything Counts, but Everything Matters. And I want to share some of the snippets that I took from that as well. Now, just before I jump into Ivan's book, I wanted to talk about that component of writing a book that every second page someone is highlighting a phrase. When I wrote my book, The 2-Hour Workshop Blueprint, my goal was to do that. It was to build the value to word ratio, or word to value, I don't know which way it goes, but basically the ratio where it takes less words to pack a punch, so that anyone that's reading it, you want them to just say to you, oh my gosh, I just bookmarked every single page in your book. And that's been the best feedback I've received from a few people, is that they send me photos of their hard copy book, and there's like post-it notes all the way through, and they've highlighted things as well. As an author, I was trying to really reduce the word count, but also pack a punch and kind of go a bit bolder in terms of what I was saying. When you're a reader and you're reading a book that's like this, it's so great because you just want to turn the page, you want to keep going, you want to get to the end of it. And which is interesting with this book because it's not a technical business book. It's kind of like a memoir with also some lessons in it. So Ivan Cleary, if you don't know, is the head coach of the Penrith Panthers, who are an NRL team in Australia, and they've had that just run of winning all these games. Now, Chris, my husband, was a Panthers supporter. Like, he was born in Penrith all those years ago. He's been a supporter of them since then. A lot of people have jumped on the bandwagon, but they haven't, I think when I was maybe 20, 25 years ago, they had a guy called Ryan Girdler in the team. I think Brad Fittler played for them, and they actually had, some wins decades ago. But recently, they are just a super team. And so it was really interesting reading his memoir. It's an autobiography, but it's also a lot of like in the context of life and business and performance. That's how he's sort of focused his energy in this book. But it opens actually with him saying that he is basically got a pack of antidepressants in his hand and he isn't too sure whether he's going to take them or not, which is kind of shocking to hear. And he goes on a bit further, just talking about how coaching is such a stressful job, and I don't think there's any doubt about that. But I think when you look at Ivan Cleary from the outside, he's just this calm, measured, pleasant, happy-go-lucky guy. To realize that there was a point, and he talks about it a lot in his book, over a couple of years where he was feeling a lot of anxiety, a lot of pressure. He wasn't sure whether he made the right decisions or not. So fascinating to read that. So a few concepts have come out. I'm not going to read all of them because, like I said, I have highlighted a ton of different paragraphs in his book. But I'll start with this one. There's a line at our club that we often refer to. Not everything counts, but everything matters. That means that even if you're only playing a trial match or a game late in the season that won't affect where you finish on the ladder, it still matters. Every video session matters. Every training session matters. Everything you do matters. Things that the average fan doesn't see or that may not show up on the stat sheet, but that your teammates and coaches appreciate, those are the things we celebrate most. I really love that it's all of the small things combined that actually matter. I mean, this was drilled into me when I was younger. How you train is how you play. He continues with this. You would be amazed at how something so seemingly trivial as picking up a loose ball can change the momentum of a game. We practice those little things over and over at training. In my experience, those little things matter. It's also interesting hearing him talk about how they worked on beating the Broncos. This was if you're a Broncos supporter, you will definitely don't want to remember this game. It was a grand final. Panthers came back after being like 20 points down to win the game. Really exciting. But what Ivan was sharing in that was like the strategy and how they continue to practice. Again, the boring things, they would read plays, they would just drill it into the team so that they could deliver on the strategy under pressure. Here's an interesting scoop on authenticity, which I think is worth sharing. So he starts off with, what does a successful football team look like? It looks fit, organised and reliable. Being physically superior to your rivals has a psychological component too. In cricket, I love it when a quality test batsman gets hit by a fast bowler's thunderbolt, but shows absolutely no pain. Anyone who's been hit by a cricket ball understands how much it hurts, but players like Justin Langer simply wouldn't allow themselves to even wince. To do so would give the bowlers a psychological advantage. At Penrith, we never aim to let our opponents see that we're tired. Strong body language is something we pride ourselves on, particularly when we're under fatigue. We allow hands on hips, but try to avoid hands on knees or heads. Anything like that can give the opposition an edge. And I know, like, I get it, the whole thing around authenticity and vulnerability, but it really depends on what do you want to convey. And sometimes as a leader, this is the mask you have to wear for the greater good. Is it you want to inspire confidence, even though you're not sure, you want people to come along with you. And of course, there's times where you're going to put your hands in your lap perhaps, but it's like choosing when do you do that, and your intentional decision around when is it important to show that side of you versus what's in the best interests of the team that you're leading as well. And often, like, when I'm like, there's been some days where I've been hosting workshops or speaking where it's like I've woken up, maybe not be feeling it at all, but it's not like I show up to that event and portray that. I show up looking as if I am bouncing off the walls, over the moon to be there. And that is not about authenticity. That absolutely is around performative authenticity, because that is what is in the best interest for the client and everyone there. It's for the greater good for me to do that, especially if you're getting paid to do something, right? There's a professional agreement in that. So I actually like that he called it out, and they use this mask to have a competitive edge. This is the last thing I'm going to share today, but I might do a follow-up episode on it because there's so much more I could bring into it. But he shares something about Hayden Knowles, who was the former head of performance at the Penrith Panthers. And there's an extract here from Hayden. So Hayden's actually written this chapter because Hayden's in charge of hosting the 7:45 a.m. connection meetings. And there's one day where Hayden's just like, oh, it's so busy. There's like gym sessions, team field sessions, skill sessions, individual reviews, review meetings, preview meetings. And so Hayden decides, I'm just going to scrap the 7:45 connection meeting because it's not important. And in this, he says that Ivan actually challenged Hayden and says, mate, this connection meeting is more important than any gym session, field session, or video session. These connection meetings had started when Ivan instructed me that he wanted each day to start with the team connecting before we did anything to do with rugby league. I would sit at the front of the room with a player and would spend 15 minutes in conversation in front of the team, going as deep as possible. Nothing was scripted. Questions from the room would come up. Sometimes there were tears, at other times there was laughter. Many players felt nervous about speaking publicly in this way, but it was a safe environment and we encouraged them to give themselves to the team and be vulnerable. Every session ended with every player and staff member hugging the guest player at the front of the room. Undoubtedly, these sessions brought us closer together. Just so cool to hear that Ivan, in terms of we're looking at performance of a team and how there's all those things, the technical things they could have done, but these connection meetings, these 15-minute sessions every day are non-negotiable. And it reminds me of the book $1 Trillion Coach that was written, and I think the guy was talking about Google, and they used to catch up on these Monday, like the head of Google, ELT meetings there, or whatever they're called at Google. And he would encourage the leaders to start off with just a bit of connection around where did you travel, like what's going on in your life, before jumping into the technical work and all the decisions they had to make. And so I really think there's a nice example of how connection is so important. It absolutely leads to superior performance, but it's so tempting for us as leaders, as people that are busy, to kind of overlook it, to be honest, as not being something that's important. So love the book, Ivan Cleary, Not Everything Counts, but Everything Matters. I'll link to it in the show notes for this one, and I'll speak to you tomorrow.